The Earl of Ravenshade was a legend in London, wealthy, cold, and utterly disinterested in marriage. Lady Elara wasn't looking for a husband either. Yet one ruined evening, one whispered accusation, and one impossible choice forced the two most unwilling hearts into each other's lives, forever. Lady Elara Ashbourne had survived many unpleasant evenings in drawing rooms across London, but tonight's gathering at Lady Hemsbury's townhouse was rapidly climbing to the top of her list. She hadn't wanted to come at all. The Ashbourne family was not wealthy anymore, and her presence at social events only served as a reminder of how quickly fortunes could fade. People had a way of smiling sweetly while assessing her gown's age, her jewelry's simplicity, and her prospects' hopelessness. Still, she stood near the far wall, holding a cup of weak lemonade, pretending she didn't hear the whispers. "Such a lovely girl," someone murmured. "But really, with no dowry, what man would possibly?" "Elara, my dear." Lady Hemsbury appeared, her rings sparkling far more than her manners. "Have you greeted our esteemed guest for the evening? The Earl of Ravenshade has returned to London." Elara stiffened. She had heard of him, of course. Everyone had. Elias Rivenhall, the Earl of Ravenshade, cold, calculating, powerful, and irritatingly handsome. The kind of man mothers push their daughters toward, and the daughters pretended not to notice while secretly hoping he looked their way. But Elara wasn't like them. She had no delusions and no interest. "Introduce me," she asked politely, even though her stomach dipped. Lady Hemsbury practically dragged her across the room toward a tall man dressed in black evening attire, speaking quietly with a cluster of men who seemed half intimidated, half entranced. "Elara, this is our honored guest, Lord Ravenshade." He turned. For a moment, a heartbeat. She forgot to breathe. Not because he was handsome, though he was. Not because he had striking gray eyes that seemed carved from winter frost, but because when those eyes met hers, they sharpened, as if he recognized something in her that she didn't even know she possessed. "Elara Ashbourne," Lady Hemsbury added, almost singing the name. The Earl looked at her with a calm intensity that felt almost scientific, as if he were evaluating her, weighing her. "Ashbourne," he repeated slowly. "I knew your father." Her breath caught. "You did?" He gave a short nod. "He was a good man." She swallowed, unsure what to say. It wasn't common for the Earl to speak personally to anyone, much less her. But before she could respond, a shrill giggle sliced through the air. Miss Clarissa Tyndall, golden-haired, wealthy, and perpetually surrounded by admirers, swept toward them. "Oh, Lord Ravenshade," Clarissa cooed, touching his arm possessively. "I see you found Lady Elara. Isn't she simply sweet?" Elara stiffened. The word sweet was always an insult in Clarissa's mouth. Elias glanced at Clarissa's hand, then at Elara, and something unreadable passed through his expression. Then, quietly, firmly, he said, "I was speaking with Lady Elara." Clarissa blinked. "Oh, of course, I only meant—" "Then allow us to continue," he said, turning slightly so. Clarissa was no longer part of the conversation. Elara nearly choked. He had dismissed Clarissa Tyndall, the darling of the season, for her. She didn't dare assume any. "You don't enjoy these gatherings," the Earl said suddenly. Elara laughed before she could stop herself. "Is it that obvious?" "It is to someone who also dislikes them." "You?" she asked, truly surprised. He lifted a brow. "Do I seem like a man who enjoys idle chatter and matchmaking schemes?" She found herself smiling. Perhaps not. Their conversation was simple, quiet, but something about it nudged at her chest, as if she were seeing a part of him no one else noticed. But, of course, such moments never lasted. A sudden hush spread through the room. Heads turned, mouths whispered, and then Elara saw it. Lady Pembroke standing near the staircase, pointing at her, and the Earl, whispering loudly to her sister. "Look at them, tucked in a corner." I dare say the Earl has found his next little distraction. Heat flooded Elara's neck. Elias's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening sharply. He took a step closer as if shielding her. "Do not listen to them," he said quietly. But the damage was done. The whispers had begun. The rumors were forming. Elara lowered her eyes. "People will think that I am interested in you," Elias finished, voice slow, controlled. Let them think what they wish. Her breath stilled. His tone wasn't playful. It wasn't flirtatious. It was dangerous. Before she could respond, he lifted her hand, gentle but deliberate, and said, "Walk with me, somewhere quieter." Her heart lurched. "No," she whispered. "I can't. Not with the way they're already talking." He held her gaze unblinking. "So let them talk." But she shook her head, pulling her hand back. "I cannot afford another scandal." And for a single breathtaking second, she saw something flash in his eyes. Annoyance, regret, possessiveness. She couldn't tell. Elara curtsied quickly. "Good evening, my lord." And she left. The Earl watched her go, jaw tight, eyes burning like a man who had just lost something he didn't yet understand. He wasn't a man easily intrigued. Yet Lady Elara Ashbourne had done the impossible. She had made the Earl care, and that, he realized, was going to be a problem. For the next 3 days, Lady Elara Ashbourne did everything in her power to avoid thinking about the Earl of Ravenshade. She failed miserably. Her thoughts returned to him in the quiet moments, always against her will. The intensity of his gaze, the way he defended her without hesitation, the certainty in his voice when he said, "Let them think what they wish." No man had ever spoken like that about her, especially not a man of his rank. But Elara reminded herself of reality. She was the impoverished daughter of a once respected family. He was an earl with more wealth and power than she could ever comprehend. Their lives had no reason to cross again. At least, that's what she told herself. Elias Rivenhall was a man known for 3 qualities: discipline, coldness, and control. None of them were currently serving him well. Since the night of Lady Hemsbury's gathering, he had found his thoughts circling back to one woman, a woman who should not have mattered to him. Lady Elara. She shouldn't have stood out. She shouldn't have lingered in his mind. She shouldn't have made him feel anything. But she had. He remembered her honesty, her calm voice, her refusal to flatter him, her quiet sense of dignity, even in a room full of people who had dismissed her. Elias wasn't used to being told no. Yet she had turned away from him, not with pride, not with arrogance, but with fear for her own reputation. He understood that fear more than she knew. His family name had survived too many scandals for him to ignore the weight of gossip. He hated the whispers that followed him. He hated the way the Ton always watched him, waiting for a misstep. But he hated one thing even more, that those same whispers were now circling around Elara, because of him. On the morning of the 4th day, Elara stepped into the milliner's shop with her mother and felt the change in the air. 2 women fell silent the moment she entered. Another one whispered behind her gloved hand, "Look, that's her, the girl the Earl singled out." "Oh yes," another replied. "He barely looked at Clarissa Tyndall that evening. Quite the scandal." "Elara," her mother whispered, noticing her stiff posture. "What is it?" "Nothing," Elara said quickly. Even though her throat felt tight, she didn't need to hear the exact words. She already knew what society made of every rumor, and rumors about a man like the Earl were always dangerous. By afternoon, the Earl's carriage rolled up to the Ashbourne townhouse. The Ashbourne household did not receive many such carriages. The butler nearly dropped the door handle. Elara, standing in the hallway with her gloves in hand, froze when she saw him step inside. Tall, composed, perfectly dressed, and somehow more intimidating in their modest home than in any grand ballroom. Her mother rushed in behind her. "Lord Ravenshade, what a surprise." Elias bowed. "Lady Ashbourne, Lady Elara, under your supervision if you wish." Her mother nodded hesitantly and ushered them into the drawing room, staying near the doorway, close enough to hear, far enough to pretend she wasn't listening. Elias stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. Elara hovered near the sofa, unsure whether to sit or flee. Finally, he spoke. "I owe you an apology." Her breath left her. "For what, my lord?" "For allowing others to speak of you in a manner you did not deserve." She swallowed. "You didn't cause their gossip." "I did," he said firmly, "by giving them something to talk about." Her chest tightened. "My lord, you did nothing improper." "And yet improper things are being said," he replied. His voice carried a quiet anger, not at her, but at the situation. I came today because it has come to my attention that people are suggesting, he paused, searching for a precise word. A connection between us. Elara looked down. I know. I wish to set the record straight, he said. To make it clear that I hold you in the highest regard. Her head snapped up. My lord, that isn't necessary truly. It is necessary, Elias insisted. I will not have your name damaged because of a conversation we shared. She exhaled shakily. And what do you intend to do? His expression changed, subtly, but unmistakably, less controlled, less distant, more determined. I intend, he said slowly, to visit your family again, openly, properly, frequently. Elara's breath caught. Her voice came out a whisper. Frequently. Yes, he said, meeting her eyes without blinking. Enough that society will not call it a scandal, but a courtship. Her heart stopped. I do not know yet, he added honestly, what this is between us, but I mean to find out. She was trembling now, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to hope. Elara, he said softly, if you wish me to leave and never return, say the word. I will honor it. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Did she want him to leave? Did she dare ask him to stay? Also no. She was trapped between the two most terrifying emotions, not wanting him, and wanting him too much. Finally, she whispered, I do not wish you to leave. Something in the Earl's eyes shifted, a flicker of satisfaction, quiet but unmistakable. Then I shall return tomorrow, he said, bowing his head. Her pulse fluttered helplessly. The Earl turned to go, but paused at the doorway and said one last thing. His voice low, Lady Elara, do not fear the whispers. I intend to give them something true to talk about. Then he left. The door closed behind him. Elara stood frozen in the middle of the room, her mother staring at her with wide eyes. What? Her mother whispered breathlessly. Have you done? Elara didn't have an answer, because she didn't know whether she had done something foolish or something incredible. The next morning, Lady Elara Ashbourne woke up earlier than usual. She told herself it was coincidence, that she simply wasn't sleeping well, that she was worrying about household accounts, the weather, anything except the Earl of Ravenshade. But as she sat at her small vanity brushing her hair, she caught herself glancing at the window, the one that faced the street. Ridiculous. Surely, he wouldn't come this early. Surely he had reconsidered. Surely a man of his position had far more important things to do. And yet, her heart didn't believe any of those excuses. At exactly 11 o'clock, the Ashbourne butler nearly tripped over his own shoes as he rushed to the drawing room. Lady Elara, his lordship has arrived, her mother gasped. Already, oh heavens. Elara, stand straighter and smile, but not too much. We don't want him thinking, oh dear, why is he here so soon? Elara's stomach tightened. This was real. She smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and stepped into the foyer. Just as the Earl entered, Elias Rivenhall looked impossibly composed, as if he had rehearsed the act of visiting her home for years instead of a single night. My lord, she replied, trying not to look overwhelmed. Shall we take tea? He asked. Her mother nodded so hard, Elara was afraid her head might fall off. It was awkward. Horribly, painfully awkward. Her mother kept smiling at them both, hands clasped like she was praying for a miracle. Elara kept dropping her spoon. The Earl, well, he was doing his best not to look amused, but she could see the faint curve of his lips each time she fumbled. So, her mother said, leaning forward, you are here for tea. The Earl replied calmly, yes, and conversation. Her mother beamed so brightly, the tea set almost reflected light. Elara wanted to sink through the floor. They spoke of harmless things, books, the weather, her father's old political speeches. Nothing improper, nothing bold. Just a man and a woman, trying desperately not to show how aware they were of each other. As he rose to leave, he paused in front of Elara. I shall return tomorrow, he said quietly. Tomorrow, not if convenient. Not if her mother allowed. Not if he had time. Just tomorrow, as if his decision were already final. Her heart felt weightless and heavy at the same time. By the fourth day of his visits, the neighborhood had already begun whispering. By the 8th day, the entire ton had noticed. Have you seen the Earl lately? He practically lives at the Ashbourne house. Lady Elara, the one with no dowry. Oh yes, it must be charity. Or boredom, or something worse. Elara heard none of these whispers directly, but she did not need to. People stopped looking through her. They now stared at her. Women who once ignored her now glared. Men who never noticed her name suddenly remembered it. Old school friends curtsied with stiff politeness. Her mother was ecstatic. Her aunt was fainting every other hour. Elara didn't know what she felt. Hope was dangerous. Hope made fools of women like her. Elias knew society was watching. He also knew he did not care. But what he did care about confused him. After all, he had not meant to form any attachment. He had not meant to pursue her. He had not meant to return every day. But something kept pulling him back. She was calm but strong, quiet but unafraid, gentle without being naïve, and she didn't pretend with him. She didn't flatter him. She didn't perform. In a world where every woman threw themselves at his title, Elara Ashbourne was the first who simply treated him like a man. That was more dangerous than he could admit. One evening, his closest friend Viscount Harland cornered him at White's. You're visiting her again tomorrow. Yes. You know what people think. Yes. And you don't care. Elias looked up from his glass. I care about her reputation, not their opinions. Harland blinked. Good God, Elias, you're serious. Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, Elara stood alone in the small Ashbourne garden, hands clasped behind her back. Her mother had finally gone inside. The household was quiet, and Elara let herself feel the one fear she had been hiding from. What if he is only being kind? What if his visits were nothing more than responsibility? What if he was simply trying to extinguish a rumor he had accidentally ignited? What if she was imagining everything else? What if she was falling, and he wasn't? Just as the doubt grew too sharp to swallow, she heard footsteps. The Earl stepped through the garden gate, sunlight catching in his hair. You are outside today, he said softly. She steadied herself. It is a lovely morning. He walked closer. I prefer it like this, no audience. Her heart stumbled. He paused in front of her, studying her face as if searching for something. Elara, he said gently. You seem troubled. She looked away. I am not. You are. She breathed in shakily. I don't want you to feel obligated to come here. His jaw tightened. I am not obligated. I just, Elara. He stepped closer, too close. I come because I choose to. Her breath caught. I come, he added quietly, because I want to. The world stopped. Quiet, simple, honest. Her doubts didn't vanish completely, but they softened. Because the Earl of Ravenshade was not a man who said things he didn't mean, and now, he was looking at her as though she were the only person in the world worth talking to. Amara didn't know what she expected when the Earl returned the following day, but it certainly wasn't for him to walk straight into the orchard as if he had been visiting it for years. This time, there was no polite distance, no cautious hesitation, just a man who seemed strangely determined to be exactly where she was. She sat beneath the apple tree again, sorting the last of the early season fruit into baskets. When she heard footsteps, she tensed, thinking it was her aunt. Instead, a familiar quiet voice broke the silence. Miss Amara, do you always work this early? She blinked up at him. The Earl's hair was slightly windswept, and for the first time, his coat was not tailored for display, but for use. Dark, worn, clearly an older piece. It did nothing to dim his presence. I don't have much choice, my lord, she replied, brushing dust from her skirt. Work begins with the sun. It would appear, he said, stepping closer to examine an apple. I have been waking far too late all these years. She didn't know how to respond to that. The Earl rarely joked, but when he did, it seemed to unsettle her more than his seriousness ever could. She returned to her task. You didn't have to come here again. I know, he said simply. Silence stretched, not uncomfortable, just unusual. The Earl's unexpected confession, he lowered himself to sit near her, not too close, not far. Just enough to make her entire body hyper-aware of his presence. May I tell you something, Miss Amara? He asked, fingers brushing a leaf from his sleeve. If you wish. I didn't sleep well last night, he admitted. My thoughts kept returning to this orchard. To you harvesting apples alone, as though the entire world had forgotten you. She stiffened. I am not forgotten, my lord, simply not needed by many. Then they are blind, he replied quickly, surprising even himself. Her breath caught, but she fought the reaction. She didn't trust easily, especially not titled men with polished boots and elegant voices. They lived in a world untouched by the kind of hunger and uncertainty she knew too well. You don't have to say things like that, she murmured. I don't say them lightly, he answered, a gentle interruption before she could argue further. He reached into his coat and withdrew something unexpected, a wrapped loaf of bread. I thought, he said awkwardly, you might appreciate this. Your aunt mentioned you rarely have time to prepare breakfast. She froze. Her aunt spoke to the Earl. Did she say anything else? Amara asked carefully. A great deal, he answered, exhaling, as though exhausted. Mostly about your stubbornness, and how much you overwork, and how you refuse help even when you desperately need it. Amara's mouth dropped open. She said all that. She was rather enthusiastic, he said dryly. For the first time since he arrived, Amara laughed, small, soft, but real. The Earl looked stunned by the sound, as though he had been waiting for it, without knowing he was waiting. When distance fades, they shared the loaf between them. And something shifted, quietly, almost invisibly. He didn't ask about her past. He didn't push into her private sorrows. Instead, he asked what she enjoyed, what kind of book she liked, whether she ever wanted to travel, what she would do if life ever allowed her to choose for herself. For each answer she gave, his attention sharpened. He listened without interruption, as though her words mattered, and that, more than anything, unsettled her. No gentleman had ever listened to her like that. A moment she didn't expect when he rose to leave. He paused beneath the low branch of the apple tree. His hand brushed the trunk lightly. I will return tomorrow, he said. She stared at him. You will? Yes. A faint smile touched his mouth. You see, Miss Amara, I find I would very much like to hear you laugh again. Her breath tangled in her chest. As he walked away, Amara pressed a hand to her heart and whispered to herself, this cannot mean anything. He is an earl. You are a nobody. Stop this before it begins. But the orchard felt different now, filled with a quiet warmth she could not deny. The Earl, for all his titles and status, had found something in her presence he couldn't walk away from, and she feared the same was becoming true for her. The Earl returned the next morning, exactly as he'd said. No fanfare, no carriage, no polished boots meant to impress the village. He simply appeared through the orchard gate with the quiet confidence of a man who had made up his mind about something long before dawn. Amara was already working, stacking wooden crates, muttering under her breath because one of them had split again. She didn't see him approach until he spoke. You're fighting that crate as if it insulted you, he said, voice warm with restrained amusement. She startled, brushing stray hair from her face. It did insult me. It decided now is a good time to fall apart. He stepped closer. Allow me. Before she could refuse, he crouched, examining the cracked slat. It needs reinforcement. You shouldn't be lifting crates in this condition. Amara crossed her arms. And who else will do it? My aunt. She's nearly 70. He didn't answer right away. He simply stood up, looked around the orchard, and then back at her. Something thoughtful settled in his expression. You deserve more help than this place offers, he said quietly. She blinked, unsure how to reply. His tone wasn't pitying. It was frustrated, as if the orchard's neglect offended him personally. The Earl lifted a cloth bundle he'd brought with him and set it on the crate. I learned to repair fencing when I was 12. My father believed an heir should understand the work he expects from others. She had never imagined an earl hammering nails or sanding wood. Nobles were supposed to issue orders, not bend their backs to repair farm tools. You don't have to do this, she said softly. He met her eyes. I know. And then he knelt and began working, not with the awkwardness of a man pretending, but with practiced, patient movements. Amara watched him, unsure what to do with the strange pressure building in her chest. A titled man repairing crates in her orchard. It felt unreal, dangerous, and quietly meaningful in a way she wasn't ready to face. As he hammered, he asked suddenly, have you ever wanted to leave this village? Amara looked down at the apples in her hands. Often. And what stopped you? Your reality, she said. Dreams don't pay for food, and people like me don't simply leave their lives behind. The Earl paused in his work. What if you could? She stiffened. Then it would still be foolish to imagine it. But you have imagined it. She exhaled sharply. Sometimes, a faint smile touched his mouth. Good. Dreams are not the enemy, Miss Amara. Sometimes they are the beginning. She didn't know why, but something inside her softened. Their first argument when the crate was repaired, she thanked him and tried to shift it. He immediately stepped in. Leave it, he said. I'll carry it. No, she replied quickly. I can manage. I don't doubt you can, he said. But you shouldn't strain yourself. It's my work, she insisted, and I am offering assistance, and I don't want you treating me like I'm fragile. His brows rose slightly, surprised, then amused. I see, he said slowly. You dislike being protected. I dislike being patronized. He stepped back, expression softening. Very well, teach me how you would prefer I help. The simple statement stunned her, not an order, not a correction, just respect. After the crate was moved, he stood beside her, brushing the dust from his hands. Miss Amara, he said gently, may I ask you something difficult? Her heart skipped. What is it? When you look at me, do you only see an earl? The question struck her more deeply than she expected. She looked at him, really looked, not at the title, not the coat, not the quiet privilege in his posture, but the man kneeling to fix broken crates. The man who brought bread, the man who listened. No, she whispered, before she could stop herself. I see, someone kind. His breath caught, so subtle she almost missed it. Thank you, he said softly. A simple response, but there was something behind it, something almost fragile. As the sun began to sink, he finally stepped back. I will come again tomorrow, he said. You don't have to, she murmured. He held her gaze. I know. A pause. Then, quietly, but without hesitation, I come because I want to. Her chest tightened. This was not friendship anymore. Not politeness, not obligation. This was something shifting, growing slowly, steadily, dangerously. Something she wasn't sure her world was prepared to allow. The Earl returned each day for a week, and each day he found Amara working harder than she should, determined to prove she could handle everything alone. He didn't try to stop her anymore, because she had made it clear she hated being treated like she was delicate. So instead, he worked beside her. He repaired fences. He lifted crates. He scrubbed the old wooden table outside the cottage until it looked almost new. And when Amara asked, "Why are you doing this?" he always gave the same answer. Because it gives me peace, not excitement, not amusement. Peace. A word Amara had never expected from a nobleman who lived wrapped in obligations and expectations. By the end of the week, whispers spread through the village. The Earl's horse tied outside the orchard, the Earl carrying apples, the Earl walking with Amara, too close, too familiar. Of course people talked. Be careful, her aunt warned. Nobles like him do not marry village girls. Amara's stomach twisted at the reminder. I know. But her aunt put her wrinkled hand over hers. And yet, child, the way he looks at you. Amara cut her off. It means nothing, but the truth. It meant everything, and she was terrified of it. On the 7th evening, the Earl did not leave at sunset. He stayed longer, repairing a broken ladder while Amara sorted apples near him. The light dimmed. Silence stretched between them. Gentle, comfortable, almost intimate. And then he spoke, quietly, I'm leaving tomorrow. Amara froze. Leaving? For the capital, he said. Parliament requires my attendance. Something sharp and unexpected pressed against her ribs. Of course he would leave. He had a life, responsibilities, a title. Things she could never step into. When will you return? She asked, trying to sound unaffected. He hesitated. Too long. I do not know. Her heart sank, though she kept her face still. He set the hammer down, wiped his hands on a cloth, and walked closer, close enough that she felt the warmth of him even in the cool air. I wanted to tell you myself, he said quietly. Not vanish like others might. Amara nodded. "Thank you." But she kept her distance. She had to. Hope was dangerous. The Earl looked down, hands flexing at his sides, as if struggling with something. "Amara," he began, voice low. "This week has been unexpected. I did not intend to." He stopped. Amara waited. He tried again. "I find myself thinking of this orchard more than." He stopped again. "Thinking of you." She realized, but he didn't say it, because if he did, something between them would shift too much, too fast. And nobles didn't shift their lives for orchard girls, so Amara forced herself to smile. "Your duties come first, I understand." He flinched, very slightly, but she saw it. "Duties," he repeated softly, as if the word stung. When he finally turned to leave, he paused at the gate. "Will you be here when I return?" he asked. Amara blinked. "This is my home, of course." He exhaled, relief, warm and unguarded. "Good," he murmured. And then, he reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. A tiny gesture, barely a touch. But it felt like lightning to her. It felt like crossing a line. He realized it too. He froze, hand hanging in the air, eyes locked with hers. Neither moved. Then, with a quiet exhale, he let his hand fall. "Good night, Amara," he said, voice rougher than before. "Good night," she whispered. He walked away slowly, as if each step pulled something from him. He left at dawn. Amara didn't go to the orchard that morning. She stayed inside, sitting by the window, refusing to name the hollow feeling spreading through her chest. 3 days passed. No word. She forced herself back to work, pretending it didn't matter. On the 4th day, a rider came. "For Miss Amara of the orchard," he announced. A letter. Her heart raced painfully as she took it. The seal, dark blue wax stamped with the Earl's crest, nearly made her knees weak. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside, his handwriting, elegant, steady, filled the page. "Amara, these halls feel colder than I expected. I find myself missing the orchard, the work, the quiet, and you. If it is not too bold to say so, I hope you think of me at least once before I return. Yours E." Her breath caught. Yours. A single word. But it shattered something inside her. All her restraint. All her denial. All her fear. She pressed the letter to her chest, eyes stinging. Maybe she was a fool. Maybe nothing would come of it. Maybe the world would never allow someone like him to choose someone like her. But for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. She whispered into the quiet room, "I miss you too." And for once, she didn't try to bury it.